Please begin to find your seats. Our program will begin in 10 minutes. Please take your seats. Our program will begin in 5 minutes. Please take your seats. Our program will begin momentarily. Good morning. Please welcome to the stage Farron Ferris, Equity and Intervention Specialist, Modesto City Schools, and Stanislaus Cradle to Career Steering Committee.
Good morning. My name is Fallon Ferris, and like he said, I'm the Equity and Intervention Specialist of Modesto City Schools. It's about an hour and a half east of here. I also serve on the Stanislaus Cradle to Career Partnership for the Steering Committee. This morning, I'm excited to share the stage with two other young leaders who believe, like I do, in the power of youth leadership. During this plenary, we'll hear from Jerelyn Rodriguez and Dr. Tim Lampkin. They'll each share more about their work individually, then we'll join in conversation about how to make way for young leaders who want to lead change. First, I'd like to introduce Jerelyn Rodriguez, co-founder and CEO of the Knowledge House. Jerelyn started the Knowledge House to help young people connect to opportunity in the tech economy through skills training, career support, and network of partners. The organization has grown to serve job seekers in New York, Newark, Atlanta, and Los Angeles. She also serves on the Leadership Council for the Cradle to Career Network member, South Bronx Rising Together. Please join me in welcoming Jerelyn Rodriguez.
Good morning. Started the Knowledge House. Starting with the female entrepreneurs who have inspired me and have empowered me to start ventures because I saw them do it. And I said, I can do that too. And my co-founder, who's our CTO, I got to witness him teach himself code and give himself a six-figure job after only making minimum wage for years. My leadership centers on replicating success stories for others to benefit and to make room for young people to lead. One of those young people who really have inspired me is my niece, Jerelyn. 10 years ago, the Knowledge House started our programs and we had our first demo day. It was a maker fair, and my niece, Jerelyn, was there. She was about 2 years old, and I remember the day like it was yesterday because it was the first time that she saw a 3D printer in action. And I got to see her so excited about what it's like to build something from scratch. You can see her in the photo. She's playing around with a 3D print of the Knowledge House logo. And it's moments like these, that's why I started the Knowledge House. I wanted to give people who look like me the opportunity to produce, to innovate, to create. People in my community from the South Bronx, my family, my friends, see, because it is those innovation skills, that's what leads to economic mobility. At the Knowledge House, we have two economic mobility programs. We have an innovation fellowship for adult job seekers that train them for code and design jobs in tech, and we have a youth employment program for high school students. We're almost 10 years old, and we have served more than 2,000 participants, with 75% of our adult job seekers securing their first job in tech. Thank you. What's really impressive, and I, am responsible for this, is that 80% of our staff and our executive leadership reflects the background of our students. They look like me. And so because of this, we have been able to bring job seekers before the Knowledge House making only $14,000. After our program and in their first tech job, they are making $75,000 or more. That is the average salary. These opportunities are life-changing. We are literally tripling, quadrupling people's incomes. Today, I'd like to share 4 stories with you. because these 4 graduates here are proof of what it means for youth leadership to create economic mobility and systemic change. At the Knowledge House, 50% of our participants identify as female. It's a very unique thing, but it's very important because it means that the Knowledge House can directly increase the gender diversity within the tech sector. And for us, what we've seen is that when you match a woman to a good job, you can see the impact throughout her entire family. And this is what's happened with Lola. Lola did our web development program in 2018. After the program, she got a job full-time as a software engineer at Citibank. And she says, getting a job in tech has given me the freedom to live a life with more choices and support my family and son. I feel like I've accomplished something. For Lola, it's not about getting the high-paying job, it's about the ripple effects that it will create within her family. And we see something very similar with Clarissa. Clarissa is a recent graduate from 2020. She actually came to the US from Mexico, and before the Knowledge House, she was learning English, she was working as a medical receptionist. She came to the Knowledge House without any experience with computers. It was a stretch for her, but after a year, she landed an internship at a company called Energy Hub. And after that internship, she got a full-time job as an associate software engineer at Energy Hub. A year later, she got promoted. She's so proud of herself. Not only is she making great money, but she loves the fact that she's giving back because she's working at a climate company. But if you ask Clarissa what she is the most proud of, is the fact that because she has gotten this job, her mother can retire early. You see, Clarissa feels like her mother has sacrificed everything for her to be here. It is so important for Clarissa to be able to give back to her mother. And so what I've learned is that when we give these economic opportunities to young women especially, it impacts the generations before and after. And we don't only see the household impact with our female participants. Let's talk about our young brothers. Suleiman actually did our program back in 2015 as a high schooler. He's a rock star. He learned data science, then he enrolled in college, and he said goodbye for a few years, but during that time, he referred his older brother, Lamine, to the Knowledge House. Lamine had recently graduated college, but he was stuck without a job. After college, he was unemployed for a year, so he enrolled at the Knowledge House to accelerate his pathway into a job. And after our program, Lamine secured a full-time job as a data analyst at a partner company called Doran Jones. Years later, Suleiman graduates from college, and he's giving back. He's volunteering at the Knowledge House. He has interned, and now he's working in a data analyst role at Accenture. Omar's story is my favorite, because it's a story of survival. Omar and his older brother, Ivan, immigrated here from the Dominican Republic as young adults. And they had to come here without their families. They literally had to depend on each other to survive. They both did the Knowledge House programs at the same time. Ivan went on to become an engineer at a startup, and Omar decided to stay at the Knowledge House and give back. He wanted to teach others what his teachers taught him. And so right now, he is our lead instructor full-time at the Knowledge House teaching UX and UI. And the students that he has impacted come back to us after they're working in UI, UX, and they're like, I want to come back and be a teacher assistant. We all know why, right? Remember that when a graduate gets their first job in tech, they are making $75,000 at least. Imagine when 2 graduates making this type of money are living under the same roof. It literally gives them the opportunity to uplift their entire household out of poverty. For the past 10 years, we're starting to see the long-term impacts of our work. And remember, it all started 10 years ago. The same way that I do with every Knowledge House student, I gave a piece of innovation to my niece with the hopes that she would use that in the future and create. Now Raylyn is 11 years old, and this is her younger brother, David. Raylyn is a creative. She's an artist. She loves to draw, she loves to paint, she loves to bake and make little cake decorations, and she always comes up with costume, outfits, and makeup looks. I can't wait to see what she creates next. She's a rock star. Her little brother, though, he's a tech whiz. He loves video games. He's learning how to code his own video games. And he builds his own computer from scratch. The little boy is 8 years old, okay? You know, I dare to believe that the successes of my family members have something to do with the fact that I put that 3D printed logo in the hands of my niece 10 years ago. And so here's the thing, whether we are talking about siblings, a young mother, or teachers, we know that when we put young people in positions of leadership, they thrive and they create systemic change for themselves and their communities. I'm so excited to be in community with you all here today as we all think about how to make our work better and how to strengthen the pathways from cradle to careers. And I have a call to action for all of us. If we want to scale economic mobility, we need to do 3 things. We need to work together and 1, provide holistic services that have short-term impact and long-term impact. We also need to pay attention to the most marginalized populations, whether it's opportunity youth, immigrants, or women. I have just learned that these populations that have the most lack of access, when you match them to educational and economic opportunities, the results are optimized. There is a domino effect. And the last thing is easy. Just put young people in a position to lead, and they will make this world a better place. Thank you.
All right, let's give it up one more time for Jerelyn Rodriguez. Thank you. Now I have the pleasure of introducing another exceptional young leader, Dr. Tim Lampkin, founder and CEO of Higher Purpose Co. Higher Purpose Co. is an economic justice nonprofit that builds community wealth with Black business owners across Mississippi. Their work supports their ownership of financial, cultural, and political power. Join me in welcoming Dr. Lampkin.
Well, good morning, y'all. I am so excited to be here today. Coming from Mississippi, it is just a phenomenal opportunity to speak before you today. And I want to cover 3 points with the time that I have today and talk about the power of experiences, the power of opportunity, and the power of mentorship. But before I get into that, some of you might say, why Mississippi? Well, Mississippi is home. Mississippi is where my family planted roots. And Mississippi also has some obstacles that I see as opportunities. See, Mississippi is about 38% Black, with Black families having 3 more times poverty than white families. So again, the obstacles are real. But where people see obstacles, I see opportunity. And for the last almost 8 years, Higher Purpose Co. has been in a position to support and work with over 300 Black-owned businesses. Those businesses range from entrepreneurs, farmers, and artists all across the state of Mississippi. And so you can imagine what my day looks like sometimes, talking with folks that have 30 acres of land, but also trying to figure out how to create the exhibit and also trying to figure out how to provide health care in their communities. We look at the businesses that we work with as quality of life businesses. And so we do this work in community with community because we truly care. So my North Star, to follow the theme of this conference, is to disrupt the racial wealth gap in Mississippi by creating an economy where Black-owned businesses are valued. And right now, they're not really valued. We've seen how the pandemic really urged us into an awakening where Black-owned businesses all of a sudden became relevant. Well, as someone that's been doing this work before the pandemic, they were already relevant in my community by providing essential services such as transportation, healthcare, access to fresh food. Those businesses, like the businesses in your community, matter. And so for the experiences that we have, I want to talk a little bit about my own experience. So I was born on the west side of Chicago and had the opportunity to be loved by my mom. And also she understood that our roots were in Mississippi. So I would take every summer going to Clarksdale, Mississippi, which is kind of considered the home of the blues. If you know anything about music, it's where Ike Turner found his rhythm. It's where Sam Cooke was born by the river. It is where a lot of other people came to create and make, but still rooted in this fascinating past of civil rights. But I remember traveling to Mississippi and those southern summers where my grandparents actually took me to Black-owned businesses and to Black farms. And everybody we talked with was so happy and friendly. And there was this community that I had never seen before. And reflecting on that memory, my grandparents also operated a car detailing business. Now, years later, it would come to me that that was the seed that was being planted. And I'm just kind of crazy enough to believe that I'm really trying to recreate those summers in Mississippi right now through Higher Purpose Co. To reimagine what it's like to be in a space where people are seen and heard and appreciated. And so what does that look like in our organization? Higher Purpose Co., we provide business support in a way that is culturally relevant. We meet people where they are. And we do that in a couple different ways through our education, workshops, and training, but also access to capital. And you can imagine what it's like to talk to someone that has a trauma connected to money. And sometimes we ask the question, tell us what was your first memory of money? And thinking about that, you could see the tears. You could see some of the trauma coming up as people talk about, well, we didn't have much money. We didn't have anything to really put aside. I didn't even have the opportunity to dream because there was no time for that. And so as we tackle one of the biggest issues in our country in terms of access to capital, we started to uncover that there were these experiences tied to why people were not even asking for what they needed because they didn't feel like they would even be heard. And so I'm happy to say that since November 2019, we've deployed almost $2 million of capital to Black-owned businesses through our funding network. And what I liked the most about our funding network, it's not just loans, it is a mixture. I kind of describe it as a buffet of capital options where people are able to pick and choose what they need at a particular time to get what they need. This has been done with partners such as Kiva, such as Southern Bancorp, Hope Credit Union, several CDFI institutions, as well as foundations that have supported our work by providing grant dollars. So when we think about opportunity, which is my second point, the power of opportunity, for me, I imagine this is where your experience actually gets the opportunity to show itself off. So when I imagine starting this organization back in 2015, it wasn't necessarily because I was so eager to go into the nonprofit space, but there was an opportunity that presented itself. In short, my current role at the bank was being obsolete. And they said, we want you to stay and become a loan officer. And I said, no. And I remember sitting in the office and they said, well, what are you gonna do? I said, I don't know, but I'm not doing this. I need to be out in the community, shaking hands, hugging babies, kissing old ladies. I need to know that the community is well. Now, let's stick a pin right there as we think about access to capital. We know that getting capital is still a barrier for a lot of people. So I'm sitting in a bank watching people being denied for capital day after day, and you want me to say no to them? Absolutely not. And so that was the opportunity, but the experience was all the things I had been doing before then. I had led these community-based projects, over $3 million brought into the community, focusing on youth engagement and safety and recycling, you name it. And I was like, wait, I can build my own thing here. And so that was the opportunity. And so in 2015, I left, March to be exact, left the bank. And by November 2015, I was speaking at the White House about what I was doing, this ambition I had to create this organization that didn't even exist yet. And so in February 2016, we launched Higher Purpose Co. But before that, it was my experience to attend a historic Black college and university. I attended Mississippi Valley State University. Any sports fans in the house? Home of Jerry Rice. Okay, let's keep moving. I'm not a big sports fan. But what I learned being on campus was that I learned more about the Fannie Lou Hamers of the world. I learned more about the Aaron E. Henrys and the Medgar Evers. I learned about the time that Martin Luther King came to the Mississippi Delta right before he was assassinated and started this journey around economic justice. I learned about those things. And again, in 2015, all these different experiences started to come back to me. And so I wanted to make sure that in our organization, we provided more opportunities for youth. And so in 2019, we also launched our HBCU internship program. We have successfully graduated 2 people from that program, 2 Black women to be exact. They've completed their 4-year degrees. Super excited about that. And we're expanding the program this year to serve 4 interns. Yes, clap it up for that. The other thing here that we wanted to make sure is that we provided more opportunity for folks to have ownership of their property in their community. And so we wanted to make sure that we were leading by example. And so also in 2019, we purchased an old 14,000 square foot building, and we started to build what we call the Higher Purpose Hub. It's a $4 million project that we are creating in downtown Clarksdale to make sure that future generations to come have the opportunity. Now, you can imagine as we're bringing in young people into the community and they're saying all the latest slang that is like amazing, this is dope, this is lit, what is this gonna be? And they're saying to themselves, you're building this for us? That's a moment there. You're building this for us and you're asking us, what do we think? So how many times in your work do you actually ask the young people you're working with What do they care about? What matters to them? What keeps them up at night? What keeps them going? What motivates them? Or how many times do you say, I see you. Keep going. I'm here. That's what we do with the businesses that we work with. Kanisha Lewis in Greenville, Mississippi came to us, and right before the pandemic, her and her fiance at the time said, we've been making smoothies and fruit salads and all these things in our apartment. Sometimes we use the church kitchen, but we want our own space. And we said, absolutely, we can make that happen. And so we worked with a CDFI to get them a loan, to purchase the building, to open up. And so they've been running their business almost 3 years now, have over 8 employees. It's the only smoothie, fresh food, juice shop in Greenville, Mississippi. You can check it out online. They were featured in our CBS Evening News story. But an amazing story, dropped out of high school, was a young mother, and now she is running almost a 6-figure business in her community, providing fresh food and access to opportunity. The power of mentorship. The power of mentorship is so key to me because I had a mentor. His name was Reuben Smith. He was a quiet man, but very wise. He would go into the room sometimes and not say anything, but I would see him always writing. And he would wait for a particular time to stand up in his very deep voice and ask this very profound question that would leave the room speechless. Because that question was rooted in community. It always brought people back to their North Star to say, why are we even here? What are we talking about? Are we really on target? He also marched with Abraham Henry, and he was also very key to starting the Head Start in our community that still exists today. But he also told me some very wise things. He said, people will think you have a PhD in free until you know your value. I never really knew what that meant at the time because, I'm young, like, yeah, okay, whatever, that sounds great. Until someone questioned my value. Because you don't pay me for my time, you pay me for my value. And recognizing that has allowed me to be in different spaces. But the other thing that he taught me was community is always the priority. And so we make sure that we do that in our work with Higher Purpose Co. We're actually establishing right now a membership council that will allow people in our membership to have a voice. And that would include young people. The other thing I wanted to mention around mentorship was the fact that mentorship doesn't have to be as formal, doesn't have to be as rigid as like we meet every day, every hour at this particular time. It just has to be a commitment of 2 people understanding the dynamic that exists between them. See, for me, the mentorship came in passing. It would be on Sunday mornings at church when Brother Smith would say, hey, I saw you do this, make sure you don't do that again. Or it could be, I am taking you to meet some people that might change your life, and I want you to listen and be present. I don't think we understand how powerful it is to receive the wisdom until we actually need it. And oftentimes, we miss out on the value of mentorship because we are so rooted in what can I get out of this versus how can I pour into someone else? See, I thought the mentorship was all about me, but actually, I was giving Mr. Smith something. I was giving him hope because he saw value in pouring his time and energy into me. In our organization, we have members that mentor each other. whether they're starting the business or they've been in business for a long time, we encourage peer-to-peer mentorship across our organization. This has changed the way that we think and how we move as a community, because we know that the narrative says that it's all about one person succeeding, it's all about one person getting to the top, and we say no. It is about the community of business owners rising together every step of the way. How can we be of assistance to each other? One of the things that you will often hear me say in my organization is, how can I help? How can I serve? How can I support you? I absolutely believe that what I do is I actually work for my team. My team is full of young people. We have artists and entrepreneurs and organizers, but they're also all from Mississippi. We have one of the youngest teams in the state in terms of the nonprofit industry. I am one of the youngest nonprofit leaders, and you can imagine the types of looks that I get in the room when I walk in with a suit like this and my blazers. But again, when we think about mentorship, it is seeing how we can help someone else get access to things that we didn't have before. And I truly believe in that. So a couple of questions for you guys to think about. We heard the goal and the ambition to serve 4 million more young people, right? So what would that look like in your community? You don't have to wait until you get back home to make that commitment. What would it look like if you actually mentored one more person? What would it look like for you to give someone in your organization the opportunity that they deserve? What would it look like if you can actually be vulnerable and share your lived experience to help someone else? The power of experiences, the power of opportunity, and the power of mentorship. Thank you so much. Yeah, where should we sit?
Okay, so I'm going to invite Dr. Lampkin and Jerelyn Rodriguez to join me on stage for our fireside chat. I'm so excited to have you both here today as we explore ways to activate youth leadership. So first, I'd love to hear more about both of your individual journeys. I know you've talked about your home and family and just kind of where your roots are, but could you tell us more about where you guys currently call home and how that has shaped your work today? Dr. Lampkin, I'll start with you.
Absolutely. So I spend a lot of time between all parts of Mississippi, between Clarksdale and Jackson and Biloxi, and that allows me to still be rooted in the work. I currently reside in South Haven. That allows me to still be close to my family as well. When I think about the opportunity that I get to do, it is always refreshing to know that I'm doing it with community. And I know in this work, sometimes we get lost. And so when I hear people say I'm doing things to the community instead of with, it's an opportunity to check in with yourself. And so we at Higher Purpose Go make sure that we're always staying true to that. And that is partially because of my experiences that I've had doing the work in community with my family members and seeing how they've been so in touch with the work that they do.
Thank you so much. And Jerelyn, I'm going to offer the same question for you. Can you tell us more about where you call home and how that place has shaped your work?
Absolutely. I mean, if it's not obvious, I rep the South Bronx 100%. So, shout out to South Bronx Rising Together. Shout out to my borough. It's where I was born, where I was raised, and I still live here. And I'm making a strategic choice not to leave. You know, very often, people growing up in the Bronx, like they hear all the time, the goal to make it in life is to leave the borough. I'm trying to prove to folks that you can actually stay at home. You can lead and you can empower others to do the same things. We also, ask our alumni, like, if you want to give back to your community, if you want that increased income to stay within your neighborhood, be motivated to stay and to give back, and they do that. And so it means for me that the South Bronx will always be the headquarter for the Knowledge House, even though we have expanded nationally. Right now we're in 3 additional cities, but we also chose those cities because we thought that they had a similar need and population that reflects the Bronx. So South Bronx all the time.
Beautiful, thank you. All right, so in addition to working with many young leaders, you both have recently been young leaders yourselves. What support, resources, or opportunities did you receive or wish you received early in your paths? Jerelyn, I'll start with you this time.
So I mentioned in my intro the female entrepreneurs that I have looked up to. And so I'm gonna shout out Alexis Morin, Ami Eubanks Davis, Reshma Saujani. These were literally the women that I witnessed start ventures. They looked like me or they were my age. And I was like, if they can do it, I can definitely do it. As you all might imagine, of course, as you develop, as you become an entrepreneur, your access to mentorship, right, which is so important, it becomes limited, right? As I have grown in my career, I've had to really benefit from having white males as my mentors. And so just the need to diversify more women leaders, young leaders to be mentors, that's a need, because that's what my students need. When they go into corporate America, they're not seeing enough people that look like them. And so we have to do extra work to hit up ERG groups, to connect with DEI offices to make sure that we are putting technologists of color in front of them. But that's what's missing.
Thank you. And then Dr. Lampkin, I'm going to ask the same question. What resources and supports did you receive to really help you in that youth leadership and grow?
Yeah, I talked about my mentor, so that was super helpful to have someone that is kind of committed to my success. I think, upon his passing, there was a awakening within myself to say, oh, now, what do I do now, right? And to your point, there was really no one that really understood like the place and the context of like why the work was so important. So I've had to seek out mentors that are not necessarily located in Mississippi to get, additional support. One of the things that I wish someone would have told me and really created a space for was for me to fail quickly. And then that was one part, but then as I've learned and done my own work around this is that it's not failing, you're learning, right? And so I really wish someone would have told me that earlier in my journey, because I think so many times we put pressure on ourselves as young leaders, trying to raise money, trying to manage staff, all the accolades and things like that. And I am hopeful because a lot of foundations and funders are starting to pour back into the actual leaders through self-care and building that into some of the grant making that they're doing. But we haven't really seen that across the board. And so I really hope that we can invest more into the leaders themselves to make sure that they are actually doing the work, because it is hard for us to lead if we're not pouring into ourselves.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much. So Jerelyn, the Knowledge House supports young people to take advantage of new opportunities. What are some of the characteristics you're seeing in these young people that equip them to lead change?
So the Knowledge House students, I would call them resilient, and I would call them greedy. We used to have hustle as a core value, but during the pandemic, everything focused on wellness and self-care, not hustle. But if I were to go back, I would say they are hustlers, because it's like they don't stop, they keep grinding. We are in a place where they are now hustling to take care of themselves. And that's important, right? Because if other folks are not pouring into you traditionally, you need to do that yourself. You need to take care of yourself so that you take care of others. But community leadership, that's another core value, right? That's always gonna stay with us. And you can tell from my presentation, it's like a part of the DNA at the Knowledge House. They see how me and my co-founder give back to my community. We have stayed in the Bronx strategically. We train our alumni to be teachers and to volunteer and mentor the students. And so it's this ability to be resilient despite the challenges, especially if you are a student in the Bronx and you have to navigate all of the negative stereotypes. And you are persisting while you are thinking about others and you are thinking about service. It's both of those things, and the balance, that's what makes a Knowledge House student succeed.
Thank you. And then for you, Dr. Lampkin, you work with a lot of entrepreneurs. How can we apply an entrepreneurial spirit to the work of putting more people on the path to economic mobility? I know you talked a little bit about this 400 or 4 million number that we're leading towards to 2030.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I have embraced is just the power of being flexible in terms of the work. And I think if you are doing work in the community, that means you have to move and evolve with the community. The needs are going to change. I talked about the poverty rate in Mississippi, and oftentimes when I go to different conferences, there's this whole thing about poverty, and I understand that that's what people want to talk about because it's so easy to focus in on the problems. And so what I encourage you to do as you're thinking about the problems in your community, help people see your vision, help people reimagine what it would look like. And oftentimes people just need that one thing that they can imagine and kind of gravitate to really have hope. We've been able to pivot our work a couple different times because we've been so flexible and nimble with staying true to the needs of the community. And that allows us to still provide the services that we are committed to doing without moving away from mission, because that can happen too. As you're trying to be so ambitious and doing the work, you oftentimes find yourself taking on things that sound good, feel good in the moment, but you're not really good at. And so I think it might be taking an assessment of like, what are your strengths, and then doubling down on your strengths, and then using that to, overcome the obstacles in your community.
Thank you so much. And my last question is for both of you. The past few years have shaped our leadership and resolve. What are some of the challenges you've faced, and what lessons are you taking away from those challenges? And I'll start with you, Dr. Lampkin.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
I think the pandemic actually gave me an opportunity to evaluate what type of leader I wanted to be. I think in the hustle and bustle of like trying to build something, there was this image of what I thought I wanted to be. And now I know who I am and walk very confident in that. And so I think the challenge for me at the time was trying to subscribe to a type of leader that people may have wanted me to be, my family, my friends, right? And you have to imagine that, I'm in rural Mississippi and I'm talking about building a multi-million-dollar organization, and people are just like, what? No, go to school, man. Like, go work for somebody. And so I think I had to accept that my path of success was going to look different. And then I had to make sure that I defined success on my own terms. And so I think embracing all of that was a part of that journey. And I'm much more rooted in knowing who I am and whose I am in the way that has allowed me to make decisions without feeling intimidated or afraid. Still make decisions when I'm scared, because that's a part of being a good leader, going with the information that you have. But in theory, I think the biggest challenge, to simplify it, I had to get out of my own way and step into who I have been called to be.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much. And then, Jerelyn, I'll ask you that same question. We know that this pandemic in 2020 and still currently going on, what are some of the challenges that you've faced since then, and what lessons are you taking away from those challenges?
So the pandemic has been like a roller coaster for me and the Knowledge House. The first year of the pandemic, like many Black-led organizations, we saw a drastic increase in philanthropy. And it allowed the Knowledge House to grow. Literally, we tripled our org budget, which means we were able to triple our staff. And my leadership also shifted. Like, I changed during the pandemic. I would say, whereas before 2020, at least 50% of my time was devoted to fundraising. Afterwards, more than 50% of my time had to be devoted to people, right? The pandemic created just strain on folks, and I needed to step back and put my staff first. And so the lessons learned really are to be more human-centered, give more grace, and focus on self-care and wellness instead of hustle, right? Because what I learned is that, wow, most of my staff in 2021 were new, but we're running the same program that we were running before the pandemic. It's just virtually, right? And so I had to shift my focus to make sure that my staff were well, because I knew that if staff were not feeling successful, the students were gonna suffer, right? And so just being flexible and failing forward, it is so important, especially during moments of ambiguity. I would say, unfortunately, a challenge, which is why it feels like a roller coaster, is that right now we are seeing those racial equity funds, those diversity funds being depleted or drastically being reduced. And it makes the people that I serve feel like folks don't have their back. And so that's something that I'm still trying to navigate. How do we get our partners to stay with us for the long run and not only show up when there are emergencies, right? This is why this community is so important, because the focus here is collaboration, and the focus here is to strengthen pathways for all constituents, starting early all the way through careers. And so we need to stick together and make sure that we hold philanthropy, corporations, and ourselves accountable.
Thank you so much. And noting our time, we do have possibly time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience, so do be thinking if you have a question in mind. But I know we've talked a little bit about self-care and wellness since the pandemic, and I'm just interested, what are some things that both of you have incorporated since then to really help you with that self-care journey and wellness journey?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and share first. So one of the things that we have done is implemented a staff wellness retreat. So oftentimes there's like a staff retreat and we talk about all the priorities and mission and all that stuff. We don't do that. We focus strictly on wellness, and that looks like yoga, that looks like massages, that looks like having a mental health therapist. It looks like having someone there to really talk about how we're different and how we leverage our strengths. So we've implemented that. The other thing that we do is before we get on our meetings, and if you want to recycle and duplicate this, we just do a personal check-in and say, how are you doing? Before we get into the reports and all that stuff, and this is what we started in the pandemic, and we still do it, because we wanted to make sure people felt seen, and to your point, that we were lifting up the humanity of folks. And so that's another thing that we do to like really implement self-care. The other thing I do personally is I am highly committed to therapy every week, because as a leader, it is hard. Yes. As a leader, it is hard. Then you put all the other elements. I'm a Black man in Mississippi doing this work where a lot of people don't want me to do the work, right? And then I still have this responsibility to show up in different parts of my life. So that's something that is on my calendar. I'm very vocal about that. The team knows, hey, don't bother Tim because he's in therapy. And so, and I think there's a level of appreciation for that too. And I think that has allowed people to give themselves permission to go on their own self-care journey.
Thank you so much. Yes.
And I'm definitely gonna recycle some of those tips for sure. Well, at the Knowledge House, similarly, we have really prioritized staff wellness. So we've implemented unlimited PTO, and believe me, my staff are using it. We have implemented a no meeting Friday so that they get some flexibility within their week. And my goal is that we celebrate everything, every small win, every change, every improvement, celebrate it, because we just need to keep empowering ourselves. What I do personally, I really try to model for my staff that it's not all about work, right? Some people don't know this, but I'm actually a filmmaker when I'm not leading the Knowledge House. I studied film, and throughout the pandemic, I actually went back to some screenwriting classes and some film classes, and I started writing scripts, and I share this with my staff so that they understand you are encouraged to have passion projects and to do things and really to dig into your interests outside of work, because all of that contributes to staff wellness. And so I'm very excited about the road ahead because everyone feels motivated, everyone feels challenged, but everyone feels like we're a supportive community.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So it's hard to see with these lights, but I'm going to try and see. We do have time for probably one question. So do I have a hand in the audience of someone that has a question? Yes. So I'm going to invite you to head over here to the center. You'll see this microphone right in the middle. Thank you so much.
Morning, everybody. I'm Brian Lewis. I'm the Executive Director of Rock the Future Alliance. First of all, I want to say thank you to both of you for your inspiration, your leadership. We're over here giving you a standing ovation. Just powerful, just really powerful, the work that you're doing. So I have a question. So we in Rochester, New York, we're in upstate New York, and we are investing in our Youth Leadership Coalition. And we're trying to grow a collaborative table of youth leaders that are from organizations such as the ones that you serve, that doing the work that you do. What advice do you have for us as we try to grow that table? Because we're not interested in competing with awesome and incredible work like the work that you have your youth doing in the orgs that you lead. We want to collaborate, and we want to support and grow a cadre of youth leaders that can really change systems in Rochester. So what advice do you have for us, and maybe for those of us who are doing similar work around the country, where we need to collaborate, like you said, and work together to try to change these systems and bring about equity?
It's such a great question. My answer is going to be blunt and short, but I'll elaborate. The answer is get out of the youth's way. If y'all haven't noticed, partnership work is hard. I know y'all know because it's collective impact and we're all doing it. But it's hard to fundraise for, it's hard to track the impact of, and sometimes it's just easier to go on with our day-to-day at our organizations than partner with other organizations. But let me tell you, young people collaborate naturally. Folks find out about the Knowledge House through alumni. It happens through word of mouth. Like literally, we can support each other's entire pathways if we connect with each other, and the young people refer students to each other's organizations. That will happen organically, but we need to create the platforms for them to collaborate, for them to give us feedback. We need to provide safe spaces for them to give us hard feedback that we sometimes don't want to hear. But we also need to provide a safe space so that they see us as org leaders fail forward, and we invite them to be a part of the execution of our work. But if you give them these opportunities to collaborate across organizations, and you create that safe space for them, that collaboration will happen, and then the org leaders will be responsive to that. Because young people are gonna ask for money at some point, right? So let's just get out of their way, because they are better at collaboration than adults.
I just want to plus one all of that. And I'll say from my perspective, what I've seen is that, and I know this from my own experience, oftentimes when we come in with like, hey, we want to do this like big collaboration, strategic plan, da, 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 and the youth are like, what? I don't care about that. I just want to like hang out with my friends. And sometimes it's creating, to your point, that safe space for them just to be. Not to be what you want them to be, but for them to be in the natural environment. And then you are picking up things, you are learning from them. And what I've seen too is that, I shared this in another conference a couple of months ago. Someone said like, well, how do we know like what young people want in their community? I said, go ask them. Go where they are. Go to the games. Go to the sports games. Go to the gaming tournaments. Go wherever they are. And you might not like what they have to say, but like, hey, we've been building this thing. I haven't seen you come around. Why is that? Well, I didn't think it was for me. And that has been one of the biggest things what we've seen is that a lot of young people don't know that you're building something for them because they're not included. You can't talk about young people if young people are actually not in the room. You have to include them. And so I think that is some advice I could share in addition to what has already been mentioned.
Thank you. And thank you both so much for your time this morning. I have gained a lot of knowledge, and I'm sure everyone in this room has as well. So thank you both, and I'm going to ask you all to join me in a round of applause for our both speakers, Jerelyn Rodriguez and Dr. Tim Lampkin.